Welcome to episode number 1 of the Citadel of Hype podcast, everyone. I'm Kyle, also known as Azor Ahype, and I'm joined by my lovely and always awesome co-host, Gemma from Secrets of the Citadel. Gemma, it's been a while. What's going on?
Hi, yeah, it's been, wow, how long? It's been a long time. We've taken quite a bit of downtime away from all of this, haven't we? I mean, obviously, we've both been very active and doing our stuff, but you know, we kept saying, all right, we'll get together, and then bam, Christmas happened, and oh my God, thank God Christmas is over. Most of my loyal subscribers will be aware that I can't stand Christmas. So now we're in 2018. We have a full year of no Game of Thrones. So what are we going to do?
Well, Gemma, I'm super excited to have you back. That goes without saying. But I think it's time to tell everyone what this podcast is all about. So let's let everyone know what we're going to be doing on the podcast.
Okay, yeah. Basically, we're going to get together once a week and we're going to talk. Well, we're going to have a variety of different subjects and topics. I mean, with the lore and the history of the Song of Ice and Fire, I think it's safe to say that we'll never run out of material to talk about, but it's going to be so much more than just that regurgitation of what you already know, basically. We're going to speak to you guys, so, you know, hook up with us on Twitter and Facebook because we are asking Q&As every week. And when I say Q&As, not necessarily Game of Thrones related Q&As. I mean, keep it clean, obviously, guys, but you know, get to know us. We're here for you. We want to do what you want us to do, you know? I mean, A, that makes it more fun for us, and B, it gets us more views because you're getting what you want. So it works quite nicely. So let us know, what do you want to see? We'll be covering, what are we doing today, Kyle?
Well, today, we had a poll on Twitter, and I did a Mino, and we checked out the comment sections of both of our channels. And today, we're going to be covering religion. And it's funny, we were laughing about this earlier. I made an outline that was literally like 14 hours of material because today we're going to be doing the old gods and lore. We're going to start off with that, and then we're going to get into some of the other religions into later episodes of the podcast. Yes, we're going to be doing an episode every week, so there's going to be lots to cover. But basically, what we're going to be doing is a comparative analysis. I'm going to be dropping some real-world knowledge on what we have had in our human history and how we can compare it to the religions within Game of Thrones. Obviously, Gemma, you have crazy book knowledge. I just did one of your quizzes and I got like 50 out of 80, and I'm assuming that you got 80. and then we'll both draw some show knowledge. Obviously, you know, we know that the show is going to be ending in 2019, but we're gonna try to bring everything together. But we're gonna talk about what influenced George in his story, and we're going to kind of pick the elements in the books, the show, and from real human history. Now, the most important thing, like Gemma was talking about, is the fan interaction. So the first week of every month, you guys, the fans, you awesome throners, get to pick. We get to pick 4 subjects. You get to vote in a poll on Twitter and decide what we're going to be covering here on the podcast. Of course, me and Gemma have ideas that we're going to be covering. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the bonus segment, but we're going to be doing a ton of different stuff. And basically, we want to be interactive with all sorts of cool topics that involve Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire. So with that said, we will be doing a special Q&A mailbag section, like Gemma said, at the end of every month. But Gemma, let's get right into the video. Let's talk about religion and what won the poll this week. So, want to start with the old gods, maybe?
Well, the old gods is the place to start, really, isn't it? I mean, that's the one that goes back thousands, tens of thousands of years old. I mean, all the other religions, maybe not the drowned god, but like R'hllor is in its infancy, let's say, compared to the old gods. The old gods are related to Druidism, Wicca, paganism. If you're looking for that, I mean, I know you've got a lot more to say about that side of things. But it started with the children of the forest who aren't even human. So this was originally worshipped the old gods were, it's difficult because there isn't like a specific deity, you know, like you've got God sitting on his cloud and the devil in hell, or you've got Zeus and Hades or whatever, you know, that ideal version of the gods. There is no family of people sat on Mount Olympus casting their wrath. Their deities are almost nature, earth, stone, water. It's very much a nature religion. Their shrines are the weirwood trees. The weirwood trees aren't the gods. They are essentially the place to go to show their faith and to worship, to connect with the earth and the elements of the earth, the natural elements of the earth. But originally it was a non-human race that worshipped the old gods. And then, of course, the first men, they had their wars and everything, and then they came to an agreement. And the first men actually took the faith of the children of the forest for their own. And it wasn't until the Andals came thousands of years later that the faith of the seven came into play. So the old gods, I mean, we're talking at least 12,000 years, at least, that we know of.
Well, this relates a lot to animism and Druidry, like I was talking about. I did a lot of research, and Gemma was kind of blown away. She's like, Kyle, how did you come up with all this? And I had to shorten it down so we can try to get these episodes to around an hour for you guys and try to make it palatable for editing into an actual video for YouTube. So I want to talk a little bit about animism, and Gemma talked about this. And animism, we look at the word anima, which comes from Latin, actually means breath, spirit, and life. It's the religious belief that object, places, and creatures all possess a distinct spiritual essence. So we see that reflected within the culture of the children of the forest. So the spiritual and physical material that all the world has, the soul or spirit or sentience or consciousness, actually exists not only in humans, but in other animals, plants, rocks, geographic things like mountains, rivers, and of course, the weirwood trees, the trees. So that's something that I found really interesting in research. Now, the cool thing about animism is that it actually rejects many different types of dualism, something that is actually really prevalent within Game of Thrones. We talk about the Song of Ice and Fire, which is actually the original name for the story. It all started out with the books written by George. And this goes back a little bit to the Greek philosopher Aristotle, Gemma, and he was an amazing scientist and philosopher, and he had a unique view on the subject and believed that multiple souls connected to distinct functions of plants, animals, people, and basically that all three shared the same thing: perception, pleasure, and desire. So a prime example of this that we actually see in the show, Gemma, is when Leaf talks about their trees being cut down by the first man. She talked as if the life of the tree was valued as much as her own, or even more so than her people. And we see Bran connect through the weirwood net, and it's got its own consciousness. He's essentially connecting into the life of another being. So I thought that was really cool. And that also connects into some more really crazy stuff that I did in my research. And this is the belief that part of this reason why Aristotle thought this is that most organisms are hylomorphic, and it comes from the word hyle, which actually means wood, matter, and form. So Aristotle thought that basically all living things that are in matter and form are have some semblance of consciousness. So I thought that was really, really interesting when I did my research. And another really interesting part about animism is when the souls perish, they believe that Plato and Aristotle actually believed the soul was actually not dependent on the physical body. The migration of the soul could actually reincarnation, think of it like that. And the children of the forest, that's something they actually believe in, and something that I believe in, that their souls actually enter the weirwood net. We see all their memories encapsulated in the different parts of nature. So animism and Druidry are something that are really, really interesting if you get a chance to go research it for yourselves, people. But I believe this is where George took most of his influence for the Children of the Forest and the Weirwoods from.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're talking about this collective consciousness, aren't you? Which we'd see in the Weirwood net. I mean, as it's been taglined as the Weirwood net, the network of roots that go miles and miles underneath Westeros, and the blood of the slain and the souls of the dead being drawn into that collective hive mind where we have memories and wishes and desires. And this is what Bran is thought to be able to tap into, which is how he gets his visions of the past. He's not just randomly seeing the past, he's actually seeing the memories of the souls that are inhabited within this Weirwood net, or at least that's one of the theories, and I think it's a very plausible one. Myself, I'm on board with Aristotle. I'm a vegan, as you know. You're always taking the mickey out of me and sending me aubergine emojis or eggplant emojis. You call them eggplants. I don't even like eggplant. It's like the most disgusting vegetable.
You know what's funny is, like, my New Year's, like, I've been eating vegetarian like 4 times a week. So I bug you, but I've been trying to lose weight and get healthy. I want to make sure that I look beautiful for our dance off at Con of Thrones. But continue.
He wants us to do a rap off and a dance off. No,
you're the one who started with the rap battle. Let's be honest.
I used to be a dance instructor, so you are screwed. And you should hear my Eminem in a posh English accent. There is nothing that can surpass that. We have got off topic.
Sorry.
Old gods. Yeah, I mean, like I'm a vegan. I also come from a family background of paganism and Wicca. So I'm very much of the thought of, let's take your shoes and socks off and go out and feel the grass underneath your feet. You know, when you're curling your toes into that moist, dewy grass and connecting with the earth. But in the world of ice and fire, it's not all fairies and prancing round in circles with daisies in your hair. The weirwood trees are frightening. There's something macabre and quite disturbing when my Druid and Wiccan and paganism circles go round to worship trees and hug trees, as people would say. Oh, we go out and hug trees. Apparently that's all we do. But we don't sacrifice anyone to the oak tree, to the mighty oak tree. Kind of frowned upon. But in Westeros, so, you know, blood sacrifice doesn't seem to be a thing that they do. It's a thing that's needed. It's a requisite. It's something that the weirwoods demand. And we've seen with trees that either, the heart trees that either don't take root or aren't really surviving, are not getting the nutrition that they need, whereas the ones that are getting it, and a lot of the characters are inadvertently bringing this blood sacrifice to the weirwoods without even realizing it. Where does Ned Stark go to clean ice after he has executed someone? And I don't think he's consciously going to the weirwood to present that blood to the heart tree at Winterfell, but nonetheless, that's what he's doing, whether he's consciously aware of it or not. And are the old gods through the weirwoods calling that blood sacrifice to them? Brienne instinctively buries a body underneath the weirwood tree. She doesn't follow the old gods. She doesn't really, or isn't aware of what it just feels like an appropriate place to do that. Mm-hmm. And again, she's feeding the weirwood trees, and now we're getting a little bit Day of the Triffids, aren't we?
Well, it's interesting because we don't really know much about the Children of the Forest before the First Men came over. We know that they had this holy war, essentially, and that's what the Song of Ice and Fire essentially is on a larger scale, is this holy war. And Martin doesn't always do one-for-ones. That's something that I wanted to talk about. I didn't want to say that, hey, the Children of the Forest are solely based on animism, because they're not. There's definitely some Germanic and Norse paganism that comes into the fold. And one thing that is actually pretty interesting, the sacrifices that happen, maybe they didn't even happen before the first men came over, but it's kind of like a 1-for-1. You cut down our trees and we sacrifice you to have this kind of balance. You know what I mean? Because you cut down our trees, we did this. So they were kind of called into action into doing that. So they kind of absorbed some of the paganistic culture themselves, and they were absorbed by some of the first men. I mean, their numbers went way down. So that's something that's truly interesting. You know, we're going to get into Norse mythology in another episode, but the dragon eating its own tail, it has to do with time. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
We went a little. Like, I know we're gonna have these rants because it's me and you, and we definitely like to go off topic. But there really is no God in this religion. That was kind of our first thing that we wanted to cover for you guys. But the concept of a God, I guess we can use the Weirwoods as their concept of like an afterlife of a deity, if we were to categorize one.
Yeah, I mean, there's no priests. There's no holy books, or they don't have, as far as we're aware, like songs of worships. There's no holy days, and we see these in the other religions across Westeros. They don't really have any rites. It's almost like passed down through generations, this folk worship almost. But you are right in what you were saying just then, that it's not like we could do this nice simple transference between animism or druidism and say that is the old gods, or like in the same way that we couldn't say the faith of the seven is Catholicism.
It's more of a personal relationship than something like pantheism, where we where they worship a messiah. We're going to talk about R'hllor after. It's a little bit different than that. It's more personal, right?
Yeah,
and more to Native American culture. More, if we can think of obviously elves from Lord of the Rings, or Native Americans in North America, like in Canada, like that kind of culture where animals and dreams play a very big in nature play a very big significance in their. It's not really a faith, but it's a way of living, more so a way of living than a practice. Yeah,
it's also a very solitary pursuit. You know, like it's in a lot of the other faiths, in R'hllor particularly, and in the faith of the seven, they come together in large groups of prayer. They have large ceremonies together in large groups where they sing or they speak about their gods. With the old gods, you know, it's a quiet time of reflection between you and the old gods through the weirwood trees. Often they go to God's woods alone and pray alone. I mean, I know they pray, you know, people pray alone in many other religions too, but that community doesn't seem as prolific. There are instances like at the God's Eye and things and rites and things where they had large circles of weirwood trees beyond the wall. Jon Snow sees, doesn't he, the large circle, and they're the hugest weirwood trees he's ever seen in his life. And it's almost like some kind of ritualistic circles. But like you said, we don't know anything really about the children of the forest and what those practices were prior to the first men coming over. So perhaps the first men kind of laid over their interpretation of how to worship onto an existing religion, and it changed accordingly.
Well, we're going to get into this next subject here. I think this is a good time to kind of move it along a little bit. And I was asking you the question in our line, Gemma, does this religion have any rituals or normal practices? And I want to talk about Bran, because I know you have an amazing video on this, but there are a few related to animism and shamanism. This is something that is happening with the three-eyed raven's teachings to Bran. And in the books, Bran eats a specific paste made from weirwood acorns. And I believe this is very similar to taking psilocybin or magic mushrooms. And this is a tradition that is very much used by Native American people and paganism, where they take a mind-altering substance in a way to connect with nature, to expand your consciousness or mind. And they believe that once you consume the essence of that part of nature, you're essentially ingesting another soul of a living being. So they're experiencing
maybe
technically the perspective of the weirwood tree, because they're eating essentially the essence of the weirwood.
Yeah, or literally, if the Jojen paste is a thing, which it could well be, disturbingly. But I think maybe, like you said, in real life cultures, the eating of a person's soul, and this happens in Christianity as well, where with the bread and the wine, it's a metaphor, fortunately, and that's a good thing. It's a beautiful metaphor, and I think maybe there's a very good chance that George R. R. Martin has taken that step, and for the old gods, it is no longer a metaphor. The weirwoods want actual real life blood, and what Bran is eating may not necessarily be just acorns.
That's pretty scary to think about, don't you think, though? Like, I don't know.
Even if Jojen hasn't been killed and crushed up and made into some macabre wow, even if that hasn't been the case, if all of these blood sacrifices have gone into the weirwood roots, by eating the trees, you are still, in a sense, literally eating the body of those that have passed before. So, yeah, I think George R. R. Martin's taken this beautiful metaphor of the soul of other people and their consciousness and turned it into something very dark, as he is such a master at doing.
This is, I mean, animism evolved into many different religions. When people are doing research in anthropology and research into theology, they often go back to animism before they go to any of the other religions. So some of the darker things that animism evolved into, the Aztecs, they used to actually cut people's hearts out and eat people's hearts, and they felt like that invigorated them. And they sacrificed it in front of the sun, which is something that's interesting. And this kind of relates to my question on priests, Gemma. Does the old god have priests? And
no.
The religion doesn't really have priests in a traditional sense, I guess. We have greenseers, special members of this society that are like shamans. And
yeah.
And Bran is basically the character, I guess, we can associate as a greenseer. For our story purposes, and we get a little bit of the Children of the Forest. I'm hoping that we get more. I'm assuming that we're going to get some flashbacks in season 8, and we're going to get a whole bunch more in the books. We know that for sure. But he uses the weirwood trees to look into the past, and I mean, I guess it's really interesting. Only certain people can do that. So we know that, obviously we're going to talk about the Faith of the Seven in another episode. They have a septon, and then there's the sparrows, which are more extreme zealotry. They have like a pope figure.
It's not priests per se, but it would be they wouldn't be worshipped, or they wouldn't be leaders necessarily, but the revered members of the culture would be the elders or the wisest of the Children of the Forest, who were often greenseers or wargs or skin changers. And but they were pretty powerful. This wasn't just somebody who was some old guy sat in a tent somewhere passing off words of wisdom. I mean, according to legends, they did some insanely powerful stuff back in the day. We're talking the breaking of the arm of dawn and the hammer of the waters that split Westeros in two, creating the neck, creating the marshes and the bogs that are now the crannogs where House Reed and all the other marshmen hang out. So they did. There are people in modern day Westeros that would say that these legends and myths are exactly that the Children of the Forest didn't have that kind of magic, that didn't have that capacity, and that these were natural disasters that have been attributed to this religion and these figures, these greenseers. But this is a world of magic and dragons, so who knows if it was literal, or I mean, we have real world natural disasters that have occurred thousands of years in the past that the people of the time did attribute to gods. Look at the flood and the volcano at Pompeii, and you know that was the wrath of the gods, wasn't it? This was not necessarily the magic of the worshippers of the religion, though.
It's really interesting too because we've only got to see the one ritual from the Children of the Forest, and that was creating what we believe to be the Night King. I think we can safely assume that. But I mean, the magic element of it is so interesting because I believe that me and you are going to cover science in another upcoming episode, Gemma. How we understand magic, science, and actual divine intervention. And then this is what George is kind of pushing. What do you believe is going on? And then I think, you know, probably towards the end of the story, we'll figure out that there's some big twist that'll blow our minds, you know?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting into the science, not necessarily the sci-fi, but the actual science of it. I am actually going to release a whole series on my own personal channel related to this, but our conversations will be an extension of this or a prompt for a future video. So they're going to, and I know you're going to do the same, they're going to tie in nicely. So, you know, it'll just be even more information on that subject. I've got some great topics coming up, like, you know, the really important questions, like how do dragons have sex? You know, stuff that we really need to know, but scientifically explained. Do you like the sound of that?
Yeah, I mean, lots of there's lizards that are asexual.
Exactly.
We can talk.
This is a whole. You know, I could talk for hours about dragons.
Nerd. Okay, we're veering off topic again. This is happening quite a bit, guys. Sorry. Okay, we need to talk a little bit about the Stark family. Obviously, well, I guess a little bit about the Wildlings too, but I guess the Stark family would be the key characters who follow this religion. I mean, yeah. we get there. We get probably the most amount of perspectives from them. I mean, we have obviously Catelyn is a Tully, so she's a little bit different. But from Ned's perspective in the first season, we're really introduced to this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is the big thing, isn't it? This is this north-south divide that we've got everybody in the south, King's Landing, and the faith of the Seven is the predominant faith in Westeros. And then you go north, and it's really not. In the north, we are talking old gods. And there's this almost mystical, ancient vibe that comes along with that. Arya tries praying to a variety of different gods through frustration, but she always comes back to the old gods. Bran obviously is heavily linked with the old gods. Ned Stark, his place was the Godswood at Winterfell by the tree. Our way is the old way. It's very much a sense of pride in the north and there are even northern houses that no longer live in the north that have taken the old gods with them, for example. Sansa goes south, and you can see that she kind of loses that old god perspective because she's been indoctrinated by the south. And in the same way, Robb Stark, he's very north, king of the north. He's very much a northern son, but he's very much his mother's son as well. And Catelyn is a Tully, as you said. Ned had to build a very small sept for Catelyn in Winterfell, demonstrating quite clearly that until maybe 15, 20 tops years ago, there was no sept in Winterfell. There was no sign of any other gods. It was only the old gods. But she is a very heavy influence on Robb Stark. And I think, isn't it interesting that the two Starks, Robb and Sansa, who were the most detached from that house, Arya has always been a Stark. Bran has always been of the north, are the ones that pulled away from the old gods. Even Jon, who in name is not a Stark, he goes to the old gods to say his Night's Watch oath. He even takes somebody along with him. Somebody, you know, and yeah, the Night's Watch themselves clearly have a high level of respect for the old gods, even though all the wildlings who they're at war with, that's their god too, that's their religion too. So, but they accommodate Jon and Sam when they want to speak their vows to the weirwood trees. So yeah, there's certainly a sense of national pride amongst the Northerners that this is us, this is ours, and it's strong and it's hard and it's deeper almost.
One of the other interesting things that actually relates to Druidry, Gemma, and we have the connection to animals. We can't forget about the direwolves. They're an extension of their owners, and I've been talking about this a lot lately on the channel. And they're part of the old god. I don't want to say faith, but the old god system, right? I mean, them being connected to that. And in the first episode, we see how deeply it affects Ned. He feels like it's a sign of something, and it definitely is. It's foreshadowing for obviously Ned dying in King's Landing because the stag killed the direwolf, and that's something that's really interesting too. How did the direwolves get down there? Were the Children of the Forest part of that to get the Stark kind of influenced in a way to open their minds a little bit more and become more connected back to the old gods?
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? We were just talking about Sansa and how she went south and lost the old gods, but more noteworthy perhaps is the fact that she lost Lady so early on in the series, and that also seemed to take away her roots. And then we're talking weirwood trees and roots, and yeah, the direwolves are extremely important, and I don't think the reason why people get so frustrated at the absence of the direwolf in the show is just because they're cute. This book readers will know that these are terrifying beasts that everybody else is absolutely petrified of. I mean, that they are bloodthirsty, violent, aggressive, except to the Starks. And there's this connection between them. I mean, in a literal sense, there's a connection in the case of Bran, obviously, because his skin changes, he shares skin, he walks with Summer, and Arya can do the same as well. Not in the show, but and Jon. Well, they are all wargs in the book, but obviously the show was focused that particularly on Bran, and we see that more in him. But the connection isn't just like they get on really well and they have a loyal dog. You know, this is a deep connection based in some kind of magic or collective consciousness. We're back to that again, aren't we? You know, and it makes you wonder, were they sent to the Starks for a specific reason? Do the Starks need them for a reason? They are clearly symbolic of each of the individual Stark child that they are associated with. One thing that's really beautiful about the direwolves is that this was that scene where they discover the stag and the direwolf was the first scene in the entire series that George R.R. Martin conceived. He was actually in the process of writing something completely different, sci-fi, and he almost dreamt this beautiful scene where they come across these wolves, and there's one for each of the children, and how they connected to each other, and he just knew that he had to write this, and that was the first thing he wrote, was that scene, and everything else in the entire series was built around that particular scene. So that has to be monumentally important, doesn't it?
Now, we got to fit some time in this video for the other religion we're going to be covering, the religion of the Red God, R'hllor. So
I told you we had like 14 hours. I could go on about this for another 2 hours at least.
I'm not blaming Gemma, people. I'm just trying to make this work. So I think something that's really interesting that we need to talk about is what is going to for me and you, what do we think are going to be the events that are going to shape season 8 that we're going to see from the old gods? And I'm going to make my prediction first. I'm going to be greedy here. I think that Jon Snow is actually going to be pulled in a Weirwood vision with Bran. And he's going to experience, and this has been really unique to the show because Bran's really been our lens into the old gods. I mean, we've got to see their ideologies and kind of how they operate, but without Bran, that hasn't been possible. I think Jon is going to experience that because I believe he's going to be king in the end. So, but here's the thing: he's going to go in the Weirwood net, and they're going to actually go view Ned in the past. And he's going to see how important the old gods are. And at the end of the series, he will settle in the north and won't be stuck in King's Landing, in my opinion. So I think that's a really important message that needs to happen. Jon needs to learn more about the old gods because he's going to learn that he's Targaryen. And there's all this stuff that's been going on in the south. And we talk about breaking the wheel. So I think the old gods are kind of going to, bring everything back down to earth, essentially. What are your thoughts, though?
Yeah, I like that. That's like that grounding, which is something that Wiccans do. Is if you're feeling up in a tizzy and stressed with just life in general, life stresses, something that they do is they literally ground themselves. And I know this comes back to a lot of meditation and Buddhism as well. And that is a literal touching of the earth, bringing it back down to what's important. As far as predictions for season 8 go in relation to the old gods, I really couldn't say. I love your idea. I love where you're coming from. The show for me, I'm not going to lie, I'm struggling with the show after season 7. I'm very, very interested in seeing how the old gods have an impact in the books, but I'm not sure where the show is going in terms of pulling back all of these themes that have been brushed upon and have been brought in the forefront. Then that sometimes they seem to kind of drop things, and I'm not sure if they changed their minds but I just don't have a prediction personally, but I do love yours, and I'm excited to see where it all goes in the books. And then we'll just leave it with that before I get triggered.
Well, there you have it, everyone. That's why these podcasts are so fun. We have two different people with two different perspectives, and we just talked about it. The old gods believe that is really important, that collective consciousness, experiencing love, experiencing all of these different things from the perspective of others as well. I mean, how can we grow and learn without that? So I think
man-eating trees.
And man-eating trees. We're actually going to we got to do a whole nother episode on the old gods, but to start out, I think that was a nice little primer. And I think
that was skimming. That was a scratching of the surface.
But I thought it would be pretty fun to go into that. And I think it's time that we actually went into our second subject. And that's going to do it for part 1 of episode number 1 of the Citadel of Hype podcast covering religion. Obviously, we have to go into every other religion and dive deep for all of you amazing throners. We can't just not cover the Drowned God, the Horse God, and all of the other amazing religions like the Many-Faced God and the House of Black and White and all that. So we will be diving deeper into that. But you can look forward to part 2, which is focused on R'hllor. That's going to be out at noon Eastern Standard Time tomorrow on Tuesday. And for all of those of you who are patrons of my channel, Azor Ahype, and patrons of Secrets of the Citadel's channel, Gemma, you will be getting that bonus footage. We have actually about a half an hour almost, which is really, really awesome. And we will be talking a little bit about the future of the podcast and what we will be covering. So thank you so much for joining and watching. We really hope that you enjoyed this. We are really excited to be doing these every week for you. That's right, we're going to keep you occupied during the long night. And if you do want the extra bonus footage, don't forget to subscribe on Patreon. You can find a link to all the social medias for Gemma and me in the description of this video. We hope to see you in the next one. Hype and love.
Fuck the king.
How much for your little clam?